Welcome to the Short of Sleep podcast. My name is Phil. This is my longest running wife, Amy. And we are glad to have you here. And we are giving supplemental material, just things that I didn't have time to cover in the Sunday morning messages. And I think this is just kind of one of those series that it kind of pays to like think about it more, because it's a lot of deep stuff. So this is just a way to think more about it, give more examples and all of that kind of thing. So we, the last couple of weeks, we've been talking about moral truth. And I've invited Amy here to just interject whenever she feels like she has something to add, because she's very insightful. So she may interrupt me, and that's okay. So the first week of that, was we focused on the fact that there is moral truth. Pilate famously, when he was interviewing Jesus, when Jesus's trial, he says, "What is truth?" And nowadays you have people that believe in moral relativism.
They have their truth.
Right. I have my truth, you have your truth. And you hear that all the time. Well, that's not my truth. Or I'm living my truth, which, what does that mean? You're living the way you want to live. That's basically
Right.
what you mean. But
We just never gave it that much thought.
right. Right. But relativism, when you think about it, it's circular. It doesn't make sense. It's a self-defeating argument. Because as soon as you say there is no absolute truth, you can turn around and ask, well, is that absolutely true? Because if it is, that's an absolute, and absolutes aren't relative then. All truth is relative. Well, is that a relative truth, or is that an absolute truth? You can't state the position without proving it wrong in the same breath. And so the claim that truth is relative doesn't hold up, because it collapses on itself. And the claim that truth can't be known doesn't just fail logically, it fails in real life too, because we demand truth from lots of people. We demand truth from our doctors, from our lawyers, although who knows if we get it from them. But except we have a great one. Andrew, thank you. Very truthful lawyer. But from our courts, from our loved ones, our employers, we demand truth. That standard of truth only gets dropped when it's inconvenient. And so the moral law is something that is universal, and it transcends all of us. It's very stubborn. It doesn't go away. It's something that's not a product of your upbringing or culture, although it can be influenced by that. And one of the things that we talked about was, and actually I think that was this week that we talked about this, but that guy John Cooper who did that survey of a bunch of different cultures and who had no shared religion. And this was back in the 1930s. So there was no internet, there was no video. So it's not like people could watch what was happening in the Western world and copy it. No, they went to these other cultures and found that they have very similar moral truths to us. And those moral truths coincide with the Ten Commandments. They mirror the Ten Commandments. So where did that come from? If they didn't hear it from anybody else, well, we would say that truth, according to Romans chapter 2, is written on your heart. So we don't have to reason our way to saying that torturing a child is wrong. Okay, we just recognize that, and we would say that's the moral law that's written on every person's heart. So it was not invented by us. And that's why C.S. Lewis says that's why you can't find a culture where the culture at large says that, cowardice is noble. It would be like finding a culture that 2 + 2 = 5. It's
like wearing red shoes with black tights.
right. I tried that the other week, and she was like, "You can't.
No.
You can't for
Shut
many
it down.
reasons." But so the moral law is written on us. It's not invented by us. And if there is a universal moral law, which there definitely appears to be, it implies a moral lawgiver, because prescriptions don't just arrive at the pharmacy. Somebody sent those, right? And and so if something is wrong for all people in all places at all times, the most reasonable explanation is that there's a lawgiver behind it.
Mhm.
And so just as an example of the fact that we know what's true even before we know what's right and wrong before we're even told it.
Mhm.
And you had a good example about Cain and Abel.
Oh, yeah, Sunday at church when he was speaking about that and talking about how do you know? Like, how do you well, no, now that I think about it, there's a couple.
Okay.
Okay. So Cain and Abel came to mind because it was like when Cain killed Abel, he went and hid. He knew that he instantly knew he had done something bad. But really, that was the first recorded murder, correct?
Right.
And so how did he know, it wasn't, how
Yeah.
did he know it was wrong? But then I was just thinking too, kind of like when Adam and Eve realized they were naked.
Mm.
Like, who told them? I mean, no one would have to tell me that I'm wrong to walk around naked. I tell
I
myself
don't think
that.
that's why they were wrong. The wrong wasn't the nakedness.
Oh,
Yeah.
but anyway, but that, I mean, it's just like we clearly have like morality built into us. Somewhere
Right.
along the line, something catches us and goes,
Right. And you have to not believe that, you have to have an explanation. Okay, where did that come from then?
right.
And I think the explanation that we get most often is culture, upbringing,
Mhm,
society,
mhm.
those kinds of things. But when you trace it all back, those kinds of things were there in
Right,
before those things were established, and in every different society they're there.
right.
So, moral truth, we would argue, is like gravity. I mean, you can argue against it, but you still are going to fall down, if
Mhm.
so and I would suggest that everybody becomes a moral realist eventually. Like even moral relativists become a moral realist as soon as somebody does them wrong, right? Imagine four people go out to eat and one person orders steak, dessert, orders three expensive cocktails, and then you have another person, maybe they ate a little bit before they went and they just get a salad and a water. But then the big spender at the end of the meal says, "Well, let's split this bill evenly. Let's split it four ways." What happens? You know, the
What
the
happens is everybody pays their portion and then they call each other when they leave. That's what really happens. Can you believe?
yeah,
Oh, you mean what should happen?
I was so shocked. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what they don't say? The salad person doesn't go, "Well, fairness is just a social construct, and so, it's fine that he does that." No, the salad and water person becomes a prophet of justice at that moment. They're like, "This is
Wrong.
wrong. You shouldn't treat people that way."
You shouldn't
Right?
assume I should pay for your
Right.
stuff. Right.
Morality is built deep within us. There are some things that just we can't even help it. It rises up. That's wrong. And the way that I started talking about this book on Sunday, this that I read in preparation, and it was a hard, hard book to read, very heady, and so, but
I did not read
it
said
was
book.
called "Things We Can't Not Know" by J. Bud Ziziewski, and I think that's how you pronounce his name. There's so many letters and so many Z's, but anyway, his argument is that there are two levels of conscience, and this just isn't the two conscience levels isn't his thing, but there are actually old Latin words to describe them, but I'm not going to get into that. But here's the translation. So there's a surface conscious layer, and that would be your conscious moral beliefs. So like the things that are just on the surface, things that you would say you believe if someone asked your opinion on the street. They're shaped by culture, they're shaped by education, by your peer group. They're shaped by what gets punished and rewarded in your society, and they're genuinely malleable. They can be formed, um, in one way or another, and they can be formed wrong. So that's the surface conscience. So then the second level is a deep conscience, where we would say that the moral law actually exists. And that's the bedrock underneath. So that's the interior witness to foundational moral truth, that you shouldn't murder someone, you shouldn't betray people, you shouldn't steal from people, you should protect the helpless. Those are the things that transcend cultures. And those things can't be erased, and they can't be mistaken at the foundational level. So they show up in every human being, in every culture, in every era of life. You can't train it out of somebody. The only move available to you is, if you don't want to follow it, is to suppress it, to lie to yourself, tell yourself that you don't know what you actually do know. And
There is a condition though, right? So I've heard about, or maybe it's movies I've watched, but there's like criminal insanity where you don't like
sure,
genuinely aren't born with that compass, right?
right. And who knows? That could be a long conversation, because you know me, I like second guess everything. That's a psychological, right? That's
Well,
psych.
I'm just saying there's people probably
I
in these
understand.
tens of people
I
that
would
are going
say
to say that there are some people that are born.
sure.
Okay.
I would say two things to that.
Okay.
Number one, it does appear that way. Like there are some people that have that gene, or not gene,
Like
but
a condition, a
condition,
mental
right?
condition.
But I would say that's extremely rare. All
Oh,
right,
oh
so
yeah. Yeah.
that's not the general
I'm not
truth.
talking like 1 in 10. I'm
So
just saying,
like
right.
it's like Hondas are very dependable cars, but if I happen to get a lemon Honda, I wouldn't think that Honda's not dependable, So
Right. No, I'm
it's very rare. But number two,
mhm.
when you think about it, that's a condition that psychologists decided was real. So who's to say that underneath all of the justifications that that person has used in their life to do what they've done, that underneath somewhere, that moral compass is still there somewhere.
Could be.
So
I just I mean,
anyway,
anyway,
that's neither here nor there.
rabbit
But
trail.
that's just
But
it is.
I was just something that was ran across my mind.
It's a good thought.
Thank you.
But so he lists 9 ways that surface conscience can go wrong, and I thought these were interesting. So number 1, insufficient experience. You just don't know better. You haven't lived long enough or whatever.
Okay.
Insufficient skill. You never learn to reason well, and so you can't process those things. Here's a big one: sloth. You're too lazy to think it through. You just you
You're
you
just
gra-
willing to let the
y-
chips fall where
you
they may.
grab on to the you grab on to the flimsiest, first argument that you hear
Right.
that justifies your behavior.
Right.
Corrupt custom, like it's been accepted around you, so it
Mhm.
never even occurred to you to question it. Passion, strong feelings drown out careful reasoning. Fear, you're afraid to reason because you might not like where it leads. Wishful thinking, you want only the evidence that you're willing to look at. You want that to be true. So you're just going to assume it's true, and you really, really hope it's true, but you haven't really looked at the other side because you don't want to know. Depraved ideology, you take real principles and twist them into wrong conclusions. We see that with all kinds of things.
Mhm.
We were just, you were telling me about the show, about the Mormon,
Oh yeah. Mhm.
where this Mormon elder
Mhm.
had described that just a little bit.
Well, it was I think it's called Escaping Mormonism from it's Heather Gay from Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. Phil was watching it and I was appalled. So I
Oh,
started
right. I may have walked through the room on the way to get a drink. That's
I
my
did it for
extent.
research. I
Uh-huh.
had to see what they were talking about. Anyway, so she wrote a book. I think her book's called Bad Mormon. Basically, she started unpacking. She was raised devout LDS, followed all the rules. Everything was never questioned anything. And then she ended up getting a divorce. And with that, she started seeing this other side of the LDS church that she had heard about, and it kinda led her down a rabbit trail of, people who've walked away from that and all that, and she's never, I mean, she's not, this is not to say that there are tons of Mormon people that are really good,
Right.
moral people, but there does seem to be, just like I'm sure a lot of things, a very, like, seedy side to it, and it's covered up. It's like it, because there's a structure, and it's like you follow this structure, and that way it never really reaches the echelon of everyone else knowing about it. So it's really interesting, but there's a lot of trauma in families, like a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual abuse, a lot of emotional abuse, a lot of guilt abuse. Like
Mhm.
they use a lot of guilt. And actually, I was thinking about that when you were saying all these things. It's like even people we talk to a lot in ministry, you see generational problems, like families who don't communicate well. If someone doesn't stand up and break the cycle, because it's like, oh no, it's just easier to sweep it under the rug, we don't deal with it. But you always get that, rogue wild card that's like, no, I can't do that. And then all of a sudden, but it really can, in a healthy way. I would always
Mhm.
suggest, like, you know because they might have a very unhealthy way of addressing it. But it's just things that need to be dealt with, and sometimes you can justify it by other things, which is what a lot of their point is in that show, is that there's justification for a lot of what they do,
Rationalization.
right? And then that they transferred that to the child, and the child grows up thinking that these things are normal, thinking, and
Mhm.
then their worlds shatter because they really do think it has everything to do with their eternity, like
Mhm.
their eternal family, like faith, like they, I mean, it's not just mom's not going to talk to you for 2 weeks. It's you're out of the kingdom.
Right.
Like, so it's, I mean, it is.
That could get into where people say where this is why religion is bad, and
Uh-huh.
we'll get into that in future weeks. I would say bad religion is bad. But the point here that goes along with what we're talking about is, you had said that, the girls were being abused in this one family.
Mhm.
And so the wife goes to the elders of the community and reports it, and
Right.
they basically just cover it up and say, "Hey, just
Right. Right.
just don't say anything," and
Right.
it
Or that,
goes
well,
on.
they say we'll handle it,
Mm,
and then nothing
and then nothing
happens.
happens.
Right.
So basically, you have this depraved ideology
Mhm.
that
It's protected.
it's protected and it spreads, and the people under it who don't know any different, who they haven't lived outside that
Right.
culture.
It's all they know.
So they just have to accept it as true. So
Right.
that could be one of the reasons that your surface moral conscience goes wrong.
Mhm.
And then the last reason was malice. You just refuse to reason because you just want what you want, and
Mhm.
so you maliciously reject it. I came across an illustration that I thought was good to illustrate this, taking a really big example, and I think this is a telling example for our culture today too, because I think when you see people talk about slavery in
Mhm.
America, wouldn't you say that the prevailing attitude is that if you owned a slave, you're a despicable person?
Yeah.
Right now, we look back and we say those were despicable people that owned slaves. But
Right.
when you realize how many people owned slaves,
Right.
and many of those people we would look at today, if they were in our, you know, society and culture, we would say they're good people.
Oh, yeah.
So, how did they come to own slaves if they're good people? And so that is where surface moral conscience
Mhm.
comes in. Um, so if you're looking at a person that was raised in the antebellum American South, or really any place that normalized slavery, everyone around this person owned slaves. The legal system protects the institution.
Mhm.
The economic system demands it, and the religious institutions actively justify it. So
Mhm.
everything around you
Tells you it's
tells you
okay.
that slavery is okay.
Right.
Looking back now, we can see obviously that was wrong,
Mhm.
right? That people shouldn't own people.
Correct. Right.
So that seems obvious, right?
Right.
So how is it not obvious? Well, to them, because of surface conscience, because of all these things that were conditioned around them. But here's how we know that the moral conscience was doing its work at the same time,
Hmm.
even though these people were going on as normal. They had to pass laws to regulate slaves. For instance, in South Carolina, 1739, 1740, South Carolina passed one of the most influential slave codes. It declared enslaved people to be personal property, but then went on to regulate them as dangerous human beings capable of movement, communication, learning, and resistance. And the law specifically, so it said their property, but then it also said we have to regulate them because they have
The capability
the
of
capability of
doing.
moving and communicating and all those kinds of things. Yes, it's as terrible as you think. So the law specifically punished anyone who taught an enslaved person to read or write, or anyone that used an enslaved person as a scribe with $100 fine. Of course, back in the 1700s, that was a lot of money,
Mm.
right? So that's South Carolina. North Carolina, 1830, 1831. North Carolina law said that if any enslaved person taught or even attempted to teach another enslaved person to read or write, except the use of numbers, that person could receive 39 lashes on the bare back. So going back to South Carolina, their code required enslaved people to have written permission, a letter or a ticket to leave the town, plantation, or assigned place. The code even included simple wording for the pass that they would have to carry. That South Carolina law targeted the wanderings and meetings of enslaved people, especially on Saturday nights, Sundays, and holidays. It also restricted drums, horns, and other loud instruments that could call people together. Now, think about that. Why?
Because if they all got together, they might start realizing that,
Right,
hey, somebody wrote a bad rider for
right,
this gig.
right,
That's what they.
right. Georgia had similar restrictions. They wrote laws allowing enslaved people or free people of color. So even free people of color couldn't use these things. Crazy. But there were laws against the use of drums, blowing horns, holding public meetings, or participating in feastings with strange slaves. Georgia also restricted gatherings under the pretense of divine worship.
So they
So
weren't even allowed to have church or
no,
anything.
because what does that tell you? If you go to church and you start
Learning who you are.
learning who you are,
Right.
and there's a higher authority
Right.
beyond the plantation.
Wow. That's terrible. I
So
didn't realize that.
yeah. So
It's terrible.
why did they do these laws? Because they were worried that they would talk to each other, they would organize, they would rebel.
It's like Bugs Life.
Right. Right.
See, this is how I
Yeah.
live life
Now, why would those people rebel? If it was all fine, why would they rebel?
because they're human
They're
beings.
human beings,
Right.
and human beings shouldn't be treated like that.
Right.
I mean, everyone knows that.
Mm.
You have to work very hard not to know that, right? So they claimed slavery was normal, necessary,
No one taught Phil to read.
necessary, and acceptable. But the laws that they passed revealed that they knew the system was unstable, morally vulnerable, and in need of constant protection. So if slavery were truly naturally good and morally sound, they wouldn't have to build an elaborate cage around the human mind, right? But slave societies passed laws against reading and writing and gathering and preaching and traveling and trading and even using drums or horns to communicate because something underneath all the rationalizations, they knew the system had to be protected from the truth, right? You wouldn't do that if it was fine,
Right.
right? The system's laws reveal what the system's defenders were trying not to know. And so the past system was not just about travel, it was about fear that a person outside the cage might discover that he was never meant for the cage. Yeah. So good people owned slaves because it had been conditioned in them that it was okay. In our culture, that's hard to imagine. We think anybody that owned a slave must be a monster, but they were just a product of culture at that point. But we do the same thing now, just different things,
Mhm.
right? It's not slavery, but there are things that our culture has normalized that future generations may look back on with horror. Abortion is one of those things. I mean, roughly 1 million abortions per year in the US alone. A significant portion of people who consider themselves good and compassionate people support or accept abortion without much friction at all, right? But consider that a future culture might look back the way that, might look back at abortion the way that we look back at Rome, that exposed or just kind of discarded unwanted infants, and say, how did good people not see that was wrong?
Mhm.
You know, Another one is pornography.
Mhm.
Pornography is mainstream, it's normalized, it's really available to any age with not a lot of hoops to go through.
Right.
Most people treat pornography as a personal choice issue. The data, though, on what it does to developing brains, to marriages,
Mhm.
to the women that are in that industry, those things are largely ignored because the culture has decided it's fine.
Mhm.
But a future culture, when we see how this plays out, especially because, I mean, back in the day, it was all magazines. So you had to
Right.
at least get your hand on a magazine.
Right.
But now it's at your fingertips. So with it being as
Prevalent.
prevalent as it is, we probably won't see the results of this for some time. But what will we say about it? Another thing that we might look back on is the radical autonomy that we give to children now. We do gender transitions on minors, surgical and pharmaceutical things, and it's performed on children too young to legally sign a contract.
Right.
Future generation may look back on that the same way that we look back on lobotomies.
Oh, right.
So that's the rationalization part. Okay. We do not usually make excuses for things we believe are innocent, but we've rationalized that these things are okay. Don't look at my stuff before I say it. You got to be surprised. Okay.
I sit here in rapture.
So illustration. So when I catch you she's texting QVC to send her packages to an undisclosed location so that I
Now
don't know
that
about it.
I might do.
Okay.
Okay.
So I find those texts, but I find them in a deleted folder. So she deleted them so I wouldn't see them. But she says, "Oh, those messages didn't mean anything." Well, then the obvious question is, if they didn't mean anything, why
Why'd
did
you
you
send
delete them?
them?
Why did you delete them?
Oh, okay.
If I could have seen them and have been fine, why'd you delete them? The deletion is the
It
confession that
okay.
underneath you knew there was a problem with that. Because there are people out there that text people that they're not married to,
Right.
and then they delete the text
Right.
and they say, "Well, it didn't mean anything."
Right.
Well, why'd you delete it then? So it doesn't mean they committed adultery, but it is a confession that something needed to be hidden. And so
Mhm.
they're reacting to that. They're rationalizing, but they kind of know underneath it all that it was
Mhm.
wrong. We would say that the moral law is coded within each person. You can't get away from it. Every culture has it. Where did it come from? Makes more sense. Am I boring you?
No.
Sorry. And it makes most sense that it came from something outside of us, something that the standard was beyond us. Okay, so that it could be the arbitrator of what's good and wrong.
Okay.
And so we say that's God. So let me give an objection because we try to handle an objection each week.
Okay.
All right, so some people would say that morality is just evolution. It's an instinct and it's society and all those things that we just kind of learned because to survive, people had to work together. So we don't cheat on our spouses because if you cheat on your wife, or let's say, yeah, you go sleep with someone who's married to somebody else, that person might come and kill you. And so you will not survive. So you probably shouldn't. sleep with other men's wives. So you could say that there's a part of evolution there.
Phil's handing out life lessons,
There-
everybody.
there's a little bit of evolution there that we learn what we should and shouldn't do. And part of that is legit. Like, you can understand how part of that comes along, because early on humans cooperated. They didn't kill each other so that they could survive, right? So moral relativists or materialists would just say that what we call moral law is just the survival program running in our brains. But here's an answer to that. So David Hume, this guy, said he has this thing called the is ought problem. So he lived in the 18th century. He was not a Christian. He was a skeptic. So he's not trying to make a Christian argument here, but he says you cannot derive an ought from an is. So you can describe something forever. You can describe every molecule, every evolutionary thing that's ever happened, and you can never get from that a moral obligation, right? So you can describe science, but you can't find morality in that science. There's nothing that says what ought to happen. Does that make sense?
Okay, it was a little
I know.
sluggish for me at first, but when then
I know.
you pulled the car in the garage, I get it.
Yeah. It's basically evolution can't tell me what I should do.
Right,
It can tell me what I could do that would help me survive.
right.
But, like, for instance, let's use the cheating example.
Did
So,
you watch a podcast or
no,
something?
yeah,
Okay,
it's just I like to keep my examples consistent.
okay,
So if you sleep with another man's wife, he might kill you, and so you wouldn't survive. And so you say, okay, I shouldn't do that because I wouldn't survive. But it doesn't tell me, evolution doesn't tell me I shouldn't sleep with his wife because it's wrong,
okay,
right? It
right,
doesn't tell me what I should do.
okay,
Yeah.
okay,
Does that make better sense?
okay, yeah,
Okay. So, um, evolution might explain why you have a feeling about murder, but it doesn't produce the obligation that you shouldn't commit murder.
okay,
Um, the fact that I have an inherited revulsion towards something doesn't make that thing actually wrong, like mushrooms, but it just means I have a feeling about it, right?
okay.
So most of us have an inherited fear of snakes.
Mhm.
So plausibly that came from evolution, right? Ancestors who feared them survived longer and all of those things.
Or they're just gross,
Does
and you
that fear create a moral obligation to protect snakes?
no.
No.
I'd take a
Um,
handbag and boots any day.
yeah. Feelings are feelings. Feelings are feelings. Obligations are something different. So evolution can explain the feeling of right and wrong, but it can't explain the ought of it, what ought to happen. So every time you say I ought to keep my word or I ought to protect children, that word ought is doing massive philosophical work. Evolution has no way to supply that. And Hume saw this in the 1700s, and 300 years later, evolution science still can't explain that. Another way to answer this is the borrowed furniture problem. Most people who make the evolution argument still want people around them to live moral lives. They want people around them to be good to them. They want morality. They just want to say it came from evolution. They want to say racism is wrong and genocide is wrong and child abuse is wrong. And they want to say it with force, not as like a personal preference, but as a real claim about how the world should be.
Mhm.
But if evolution is doing all the work, where does that moral force come from? Why does your evolved feeling have any authority over my different evolved feeling? Why should we go with your feelings instead of mine? If we're all just running survival programs, why should yours win? So that every time that you make an argument for something that should happen, you're borrowing, you're sitting on furniture that was built by somebody else. You're borrowing against a moral structure that you say doesn't exist. Does that make sense? So we would say, because without a moral, you can't say murder is wrong.
Right.
So you're borrowing from theistic arguments about God. You're arguing from the morality, the moral truth that murder is wrong, to make your argument that what should or shouldn't happen in your personal life. But if evolution is true, you have no right to make that argument. You're borrowing that from you're using the foundation of morality to make that argument. And all this is very deep, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And my brain isn't like,
Now I'm thinking about furniture.
yeah. So, but these are, I know this isn't like typical sermon content. You're used to hearing 3 points in a poem, and this is just how it is. These are deep, deep things to consider. And we want to be mindful of people that think about these things deeply, but aren't Christians. And to say that we recognize the way that you're thinking, and it's not dumb. I get why you're thinking that. But by using these deeper philosophical arguments, we begin to realize that all of these arguments against God collapse on themselves. And it points you're just with every argument, it's pushing you closer to something that transcends us. Whether that's morality, whether that's science, and whatever. So that's that. So that's 2 episodes back to back. Ask if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comments. If you have some comments about how absolutely wrong you are, or we are, or how fabulous Amy looks, you can leave those in the comments.
And we know Phil's glasses are crooked.
And I can't do anything about that. I
think too, it's the angle. Like, see, that looks a little better to me.
Okay, let's start from scratch. Let's re-record.
Oh, no. Just deal with it.
So like I said, we'll be on vacation next week. So we'll try to do one from Florida, but if not, we may end up doing 2 episodes back to back again the following week. But we hope you have...
And who knows? You might want us to do it after vacation. We might have some things to unload personally.
I'll be more tan. Or at least you will. I don't know that I will. Anyway, join us Sunday, because we are now making a pivot to the historical proofs for the Bible and why we can trust the scriptures.
And it's Mother's Day.
And it's Mother's Day, yeah.
Bring your mom.
Bring your mom on Mother's Day. Come on. You need to do that. All right. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.